I mean, we're so excited. This is a brand new conference this year. Thank you for giving me a second to talk about it. Eric is on our advisory board for at least the second year in a row with me and my team. And we've just had an incredible amount of insight from advisors and HR leaders about what we should be talking about. There's no shortage of ideas here. But we're really, really psyched. We're going to have some incredible networking opportunities and some new interactive moments at the conference. Incredible speakers, as mentioned, Eric, of course, being one of them, HR leaders and benefit leaders from Walmart, SAP, AECOM, Pepsi, Grainger. So some really, really smart folks taking the stage and being on the floor to network and share ideas. And we're thrilled to be in beautiful San Diego. And we're really excited to have our keynote speaker, Rachel Druckenmiller, who Eric kindly introduced us to. And every time I've spoken to Rachel, I'm just like, oh my God, I want to see this woman speak on stage now. She's got just like the most incredible energy, and she's going to be speaking specifically in working with our audience on site too. The session is Ignite Intentional Leadership. Mm-hmm. And I'm really, really excited that she's going to be speaking and kind of dispelling that advice and action items to our audience. I think it's wonderful that we're going to spend 3 days talking about how to deliver benefits and opportunities and culture to employees. But I think it's a really nice moment for people in your position, Eric, and HR leaders at employers and benefit leaders at employers to also think about how you can take care of yourself and make sure that you're your own best leader. And that trickle down within organizations is so vital. So I can't wait for Rachel to do her thing.
Welcome to the Rockstars Rocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of Rockstars Rocking, where you know it. I always have the best, the most incredible, exceptional, and I could go on and on with superlatives, but I'll spare you for the moment. Guests each and every week that we have an interview, and guess what? This week is no different. I'm super pumped, super excited to have my good friend Stephanie Schomer, the editor-in-chief of Employee Benefit News, an Horizon company out of New York City, on the program. What's up, Stephanie?
Hey, Eric, it's nice to see you. I'm honored to be here. I hope I can live up to the past guests' reputations.
Oh man, well, this is so cool because you being an editor-in-chief and in journalism and so forth, you're used to doing the interview, yes?
Yes, I'm nervous. I haven't had the tables turned on me in quite some time.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm going to throw a million curveballs at you, and
I expect nothing less from you.
Sliders and any baseball acronym I can remember. I'm a big baseball guy. But let me get into it. You know, you weren't necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you were born for employee benefits and insurance and so forth. Like, I don't know, were you, as a little girl growing up, wherever you grew up, maybe you'll enlighten us, did you say, Mama, Papa, I was born to cover insurance and employee benefits? Was that your dream? Or, I mean, you tell me.
You know, it was not. And and even before I took this job, I was a little mixed on what it would mean and what this space was like. I spent most of my career prior to joining EBN in consumer publications, and kind of bounced around from business and entertainment and design. And to be totally frank with you, Eric, when I heard about this job and it was explained to me and I had not been familiar with Horizon or EBN prior, my initial thought was, God, that sounds so boring. And then I looked into what the publication does and what this community does, and really just became fascinated with it. And that has totally held up in the past 2 years since I've been here. The subject matter is amazing, but I think the best part, and I'm not just trying to compliment you, is how much passion there is in this space. I think you guys are all like advisors, brokers, HR leaders, everyone that works to deliver the employee experience. it's such an optimistic space to work in, which is not always easy to say about journalism. So I really love it. And I get a lot of questions still from past colleagues at consumer pubs, and they're like, oh, so do you like it over there? I'm like, it's the best job I've ever had. I'm obsessed with it. And to your point, there's still plenty to learn. Like 2 years is not enough of a crash course to get to know this very complicated space. So I always appreciate the support and insight that you and your community has given me.
Well, I appreciate that. And, it's interesting because you're right. Two years is not enough of a crash course. You're going to be constantly learning. I've been doing this almost 24 years. I started when I was 4, obviously. And the reality is I'm still learning. I was just talking to a colleague Friday. I was at the airport on Friday. I'm just trying to remember when I was talking to him, and this past Friday. And he's been I've known him for years, and he started telling me things. I'm like, I've never heard of that. That's incredible. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. So I'm always learning too. And I think it's important because our industry is constantly evolving. And, I don't know. I don't want to be that guy that says that only that, because I got to believe every industry would say that. Any industry, any business is always going to say, we're always changing, we're always evolving. So I just want everybody to remember and realize that benefits and insurance are certainly no different. Now, before you started with EBN, you were with a number of places, but actually 3. I'm looking at it here. 2 of the 3 are my favorite business magazines: Fast Company and Entrepreneur Magazine. I don't know if you were at the Entrepreneur Magazine, says media, but dude, I love those magazines. I read them all the time when I'm looking at non-employee benefit stuff, just entrepreneurial, business-related things. And heck, I don't know if you worked with Jason Pfeiffer, but gosh, I love that guy. I've never met him.
Yeah.
Talk about a super social guy. I talked to him on Instagram Messenger, and he interacts. I think it's him, and it's like we're friends. I don't know him.
Yeah, I mean, both of those, I'm still huge fans of those publications, and Leaving Entrepreneur, and I was at the magazine, was one of the hardest decisions I ever made. Jason and I actually worked together at Fast Company.
Oh, you do know him?
Yeah, the staff over there is really small, like they are tiny and mighty. So Jason and I worked together at Fast Company, and then when he was at Entrepreneur, I kind of came over and really worked very, very hand in hand with him on the magazine, along with our creative director and a few incredible, talented people. And like 5 of us put out that magazine every month, and they have a similarly small and amazing team doing it now. But Jason's great, and Jason has the capacity to do exactly what you just said in a way that like I've never seen. It's absolutely him. He loves the hustle. He loves talking to people about anything and everything. So it doesn't surprise me at all that you've chatted with him on Instagram.
I literally just randomly, I follow him on Instagram, and I guess I like something or send him a message or whatever. I don't care. I don't expect. I do that with celebrities and famous people all the time. Most of them never react or send anything back. And he responded and he asked a question. I was like, is this like an intern? Is this him? Like, what's going on? So anyway, if you talk to him, tell him the creepy dude that Instagram Dev is daddy. That's me. It's personal. My son is Devin. My daughter's Dylan. I like his stuff. I appreciate it.
I'll let him know. I will text him.
I'm not that creep that he might think I am.
He doesn't think anyone's a creep. It's another wonderful part of him. He's like, well, everyone's just curious and wants to learn. So he won't have ever thought that you were a creep. But yeah, working in Entrepreneur when Jason took over that magazine, we really wanted to focus on delivering really useful content to entrepreneurs, not just news in the space, but stuff they could use. And I think shifting that mindset focus was one of the things that really, I think, set me up to enjoy the work at EBN, because it's all about useful information. We can get our news from anywhere, but it's about applying it to the work, and doing that for the entrepreneurial audience was amazing and exciting, and honestly doesn't feel that much different from the way that we try to speak to EBN's community.
So when you were let's dovetail, right? So when you were at Entrepreneur, which is very different, I would imagine, than covering entertainment stuff. You were with Entertainment Weekly prior. That's my wife's favorite publication. She's big into that stuff. But when you were at Entrepreneur, did you ever cover healthcare? Do you remember a time where you guys had an article about business and healthcare and what's going on in the world?
It wasn't healthcare so much, but what we did cover a lot, you know, even prior to the pandemic, and then once 2020 hit so much more,
Sure.
was building a company that was that really stood for something, not just in the marketplace, not just branding, but
Mhm.
how people were treated internally.
Hmm.
And so we did a lot of workplace culture coverage, and a lot of coverage on how to build a company that was equitable and that was fair. And while we didn't dig into like insurance benefits
Sure.
necessarily, I think it laid a foundation and really kind of piqued an interest for me in how companies take care of their employees. This was also at the time when like the kind of idea of the girl boss was being really, really dismantled, and people were really examining how leaders of both and all genders manage their teams and treat their employees. And it was interesting to dig into. I don't remember a time prior when that scrutiny was on leaders so much. And seeing the impact of that was interesting at the time. And I think we're still seeing the impact of that, and that empowerment of employees to speak up and feel like they're actually going to be heard, was really, really just a massive shift in workplace culture. And digging into that and digging into the grains of that at EBN has been really terrific.
Well, let me ask you, speaking of culture and speaking of speaking up and having a voice, right? What do you think, right? It's your opinion. I don't want to get you in trouble. Speak freely if you're able. Is it lip service? Do you think there's a lot of companies out there that are saying, "Oh yeah, open door policy"? That's really old school to say that, but speak up, share your voice. Your opinion's valuable, right? You can
Mhm.
hear some cynicism in my voice. Is it cynical? Is it actual? Is it maybe both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I take the more optimistic view of this. I think that when companies put policies in place and say that they stand for stuff, I think they mean it. I think they intend to mean it. I think that where a disconnect happens that I don't know that we scrutinize enough or dig into enough is that the people who are kind of at the front lines of a company, the middle managers, their direct reports, like that culture is often very different from what is happening in the C-suite or even the financial decisions that the board is making. And I think we see a lot of companies getting a hard time about leadership policies or even, you know, organizations that they support outside of the company. And I don't necessarily think that that is reflective of the people who are the heart and soul of the company. And yes, in a perfect world, we should reconcile those things, but I don't think it's fair to give an entire organization, especially the people who are making it tick, a bad rap.
Sure.
And most of the people that we speak to in our reporting, again, I don't want to sound naive, but I buy their intention. You know,
Mhm.
no one's out to create a company that treats its employees like garbage and makes them feel horrible and not want to come to work. There's always going to be work to do. There's no perfect answer about how to do that. I think the past 3 years have given people more insight than we could have ever anticipated about what does work and what doesn't. But like you said, we're always evolving and always learning. So plenty of more work to be done. But I think the good intention is mostly there. We just have to figure out how to put it into practice.
We My firm, we partner with advisors and brokers and so forth. We don't go direct to market. And one of my good friends and advisor partners, Jim Blachek, James, but he goes by Jim. And you may know his name. He's contributed to EBM before. He actually had a tragic event happen in his life years ago. Long story short, very unfortunate. His son committed suicide. I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. It's public. He's spoken on stage about it. He's delivered keynotes and so forth. But here's the power in what happened with Jim, and you'll understand where I'm going in a minute. He actually, it makes sense. He shut down. So it happened. His world turned upside down. His wife, himself, his other kids shut down. He literally did not work, and he's the owner of the agency. He has a partner, but they own the agency. He didn't work for upwards of, I want to say, 2 years, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's interesting because he wasn't involved. His 50-50 partner was now expected to do 100% of the work naturally, and he never quite recovered in those first 2 years. He's great now. His employees, Stephanie, stepped up.
Mhm.
his employees, he said, I don't know how many at the time, but he's got roughly 15, 20 people that work for him and his partner. They stepped up beyond all belief. They had some of their most record years at that time, sales wise and retention wise for clients and so forth. And his keynote that he delivers is all about the notion of without my employees, I have nothing. I don't have a business. So any entrepreneur, any business person can certainly talk about the fact that without clients, I don't have a business. Sure, I get it. But without your core client, call it what you want, your employee, your most valuable asset, you have nothing. And he's living proof of it. And the reason I bring that up is because he's actually met, and as have I in 24 years in benefits, Stephanie, we've met with businesses, HR leaders and entrepreneurs and CEOs and nonprofit executive directors who behind closed doors will literally look us in the eye. Don't worry, I'm not going to name names, but they'll look us in the eye. And
I don't care if you name names.
I wouldn't. They say, I'm not kidding. They say, we hate our employees. We want to do as least as possible, save as much money, and just barely make the minimum for ACA requirements, whatever it is, Obamacare back in the day. And every now and then I'd hear that and I would think, oh, that's just some guy being sarcastic or whatever. No, they genuinely mean it. The reason I bring that up is because Jim and I and many others, we're not the only ones, we walk away from those businesses. We don't want that culture. We don't want, and we're talking about mega, multiple thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars of income and revenue for our firms. And we've walked away multiple times over the years from big firms that have that attitude and that cultural, that shift that's completely against and different to what we have. I think it fits well for what you had just talked about, because the reality is every company is a little bit different. But I choose to be surrounded myself, client-wise, with the folks that are positive and care about their employees and want to do the best. And that doesn't always mean you have to spend a lot of money, but you want to do the best with the budget you have. In your, I know it's only a couple of years, but in your couple of years with EBN and Horizon, have you ever covered stories or heard stories similar to that, in that you've had people tell you that they really just don't care? I'm just curious your opinion or your thought on that in general.
I mean, it's so disheartening to hear, and I totally believe you. No one is going to say that on the record to a journalist, even if they think it. But, you know, to your point about wanting to work with people who want to do the best for their employees, regardless of budget, I think that's what's been really interesting. You know, we cover a lot of big companies at EBN, but we also cover a lot of small and mid-sized organizations. And we've seen this trend of companies that want to do right by their employees, but maybe don't have an endless budget to do so.
Sure.
And they're just, I was talking to Ed about this the other day. They say it. They say, here's what we can do with your benefits package this year. Here's where we were limited by budget. This is the compromise. Like, we welcome the feedback.
Sure.
And that transparency goes so far. I think that's the difference. And for those companies who are telling you that they hate their employees and don't want to take care of them, like, the money they're going to waste on.
These are people leaders. These are heads of HR, CHROs and CFOs and CEOs.
I mean, that just from a business perspective is so silly to me. The money they're going to spend on churn and the time they're going to spend on replacing those folks who are going to leave. Like, if we've learned anything over the past 3 years, it's that people do not have to stay. My sister works in insurance, actually, just by coincidence. And she spent 13 years at one company because she felt attached and seen by the leadership. And it was a very good opportunity that finally got her to make a switch. But if that company hadn't been taking care of her, she would have been out the door a lot longer. Like, we all know people like that. And we all know people who do job hop because they don't get the treatment that they deserve. And whether that's in the form of flexibility or benefits or compensation or just having a manager that you can speak to humanly, that's just, I'd be curious to look at the turnover rates of those organizations that said that to you.
Well, and let's face facts, right? There was certainly plenty of terrible with the pandemic, but there were some, dare I even say the word good? And one of the things I find to be very good is, and I look at me, I'm a small business. I have a
Mhm.
dozen employees, and the reality, I've been able to hire more talent now that I've been able to expand my reach. For years, I've been in the
Mhm.
business 24 years. For 20 of those years, 20 of those years, I only thought about, well, I have an office. Do they live within a driving distance? Can they come in? I never crossed my mind, of course, to think about somebody that could work virtually. And now I have an incredible rock star in Kansas, of all places.
Mhm.
I have somebody in Pennsylvania, which I'm in Maryland. It might sound close, but it's not that close.
It's
I
not.
promise you. Nobody wants to commute that way, even if it's a couple hours. So, and I have people scattered around, is my point. But I feel like small, mid, and large companies alike have all been able to benefit from that virtual hiring ability that basically we all, as a society, as a world, prove business can still
Mhm.
happen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, even just from a personal standpoint, I was trying to hire a staffer for EBN, I think the beginning of last year. And, um, we were distributed before the pandemic, even more so now, but most of my team, just by circumstance, is in New York.
Uh-huh.
And if I hadn't been to look outside of New York, been able to look outside of New York, it would have taken a lot longer. Like, we hired an incredible editor and writer. She's based in North Carolina.
See?
We love her. I would love to see her in person and go out to dinner and get drinks more often. But other than that, it's business as usual.
Right. Right. Well, let's
And
talk about this then. So what have you seen? What have you heard and by the way, for everybody listening, obviously I appreciate you. You know that. I always say that. But if you're not already a subscriber to EBN magazine, check them out, benefitnews.com. It's an incredible
you
publication. Oh
got
my
it.
goodness. And we don't edit, so that will stay in there. You're welcome, everybody listening. It's an incredible publication, not just for small, mid, large business leaders and HR leaders and benefit advisors alike. But what's going on right now with work from home versus come into work? I know there's ebbs and flows. I know there's like a tug of war with big companies,
Mhm.
mandating, I think, as far as what I've read. But anything you can shed some light on?
I mean, I am endlessly fascinated by this.
Me too.
Obviously, we're seeing the big companies want people back. We're seeing it, Horizon primarily serves a financial services world, professional services world. We're seeing a lot of push to go back.
That's the world that really keeps pushing it.
Yeah, and I think it's happening outside of it too. Like, we are still remote first at Horizon, and my husband's company is remote first. We are two of the last people standing among our friend group in New York, and like all of our friends work in kind of more creative fields, like not the professional services world. So even outside of that space, that's got the big office towers in downtown Manhattan, people are mostly back 3 or 4 days a week. Most people that I've spoken to in real life have kind of adapted, and they're like, it is what it is. What are you going to do? But I think it will be interesting to see how this shakes out. I think there are obviously many companies, especially small and mid-sized, that will stick to this remote model. And I'm curious to see how many employees of companies that are forcing people back either full-time or part-time might lose talent. I think a lot of people will stay. Obviously, the financial firms of the world, they come with their own benefits in terms of actual benefits and compensation and other perks that we can't overlook. But I think this demand to have people back into the office for reasons that don't really make a lot of sense to me, I'm curious to see how it plays out. And I'm curious, like, what are you hearing from clients and from your own circle? Because we were in a brainstorm the other day, and one of my reporters, Paula, was just like, what's the point of this? Like, is it about your lease? Like, because at least that I understand, but otherwise, what's the point? And so she's going to work on like a point counterpoint with employees and execs to kind of understand at least the point of return to office plans in a way that they could defend them. I think there's a lot of value in in-person collaboration. I'm not anti-office, but I think taking your employees' feedback and needs into consideration is really important. I think we aren't talking enough, or rather leaders aren't talking enough about the kind of wrench this is throwing in the lives of caregiver employees who have really been able to figure out a schedule that works for them the past 3 years. So I think that's going to continue to be a sticking point. But yeah, I'm curious what the return to office push looks like from your perspective.
I mean, I have hundreds of employer group clients all across the country, and I don't admittedly dig into that nearly as
Mhm.
much because of the nature of what I'm doing for them isn't really
Right.
applicable to ask or look at those questions. However, I have seen that it's pretty much what you've summed up, and it's pretty much what we see and hear in the media. Some people, no offense, I consider, even though it's a small podcast, I'm part of the media in some capacity, and some people consider media as not
I'm not
always
offended by that.
the not always the correct news would be a way to look at it. I don't know, but I've experienced it. I've seen it. I have clients where they are 100% virtual. I have a new client we brought on board January 1. They're 350 lives scattered around the country,
Mhm.
and they don't have a corporate office. They literally have a mailing PO box address for business purposes, but they have no physical location at all, literally. Um, and they're thriving and they're growing and they're having a lot of fun, and their employees, I guess I can't speak about their culture. I don't work there, but it seems like it's going well. And then I have groups that are similar size or bigger, much bigger, 10 times bigger, and they're scattered around the country, and they're trying to get people to go back to the office. Trying being the operative word there. And then I have small businesses where they just really, that's just the way they practice business. And depending on the state, they may or may not have ever shut down, and I'll leave it at that.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
the reality is, it's all over the place. And
Yeah.
look, I'm a big believer that culture in and of itself is a benefit. I've said this for years to folks. A benefit is a benefit is a benefit is a benefit, regardless of who pays for it or if there's a cost to it. Anything that I, as an employee, can get working across the street at the next company, that's a benefit. If I can't get it at one company, but I can't get it at the other company, that's a benefit. So if all things are equal, pay is equal, commute time is equal, virtual commute time is equal,
Mhm.
benefits are equal, but the company across the street, literally, I sense, and I know people there, and they have the most insanely positive, perfect culture, and I'm not enjoying the cancer poison that I have in my current culture. Culture is a benefit, and I'm going to
Mhm.
leave. And frankly, I have heard many stories of employees who leave, and they tell the truth during exit interviews, and they tell their employer, "I'm leaving to take a pay cut
Mhm.
because I just think it's going to be a more fun environment, et cetera, et cetera." So I think it's such an overlooked piece of the benefits puzzle that a
Mhm.
lot of businesses aren't getting. And in my experience, I don't know if you've seen this as well when you've interviewed small, mid, and large company leaders, but my experience is it's the smaller, mid-sized companies that are getting it faster and understand it quicker, and it's easier than the larger. And to me, I guess it makes a little sense because the
Mhm.
larger you are, the harder it is to manage and lead.
Yeah, I think anytime there's a larger company, it's just there's more red tape. It's, the months that it takes to change anything.
Right.
Uh, and I don't necessarily even fault anyone for that, but it's just the system in place. Um, but yeah, I think to your point, that culture across the street, I think what we're also seeing a lot of, especially from Gen Z and even millennials, is that if that culture, if it's toxic, that's bad enough. But if you're not giving people a sight line to growth in their own career, they're also going to go to the company across the street with a more fun culture, because you have to show people that there's a path forward, and that there's a path forward at your company, and that also the skills they're acquiring at your company could be useful in the future, whether with you or elsewhere. So
Sure.
I think, and to your point, like that's a benefit. I think I love when you describe benefit, because culture is a benefit. All of the kind of perks that get discussed, benefits, I don't have to tell you. But it's so much more than what you get on that kind of offer letter or benefits package sheet that make people come to you and stick around.
It's always been in my career, it's always been a finite definition of the word benefit. Benefit typically means the word insurance. Most people in leadership and C-suite typically have associated benefit and insurance in the same word. They're
Mhm.
synonymous. Hope you can't hear the lawnmower. This is live. Well, we're recording it live. But the reality, look, is it's got to be broader than that. It's got to include culture. It's got to include non-insurance things. There's so many perks and non-insurance programs and services that are out there in the world. Look, like an EAP, an employee assistance program, is not insurance, but it's a benefit, and it's a huge benefit. It's a growing in demand benefit that's getting bigger and better every single year. And we implement it in a lot of our companies because mental health is such a big challenge. I mean, you're talking to a guy whose wife, my wife Megan, she owns and runs her own private practice. She's an LCSWC a psychotherapist, and she's never been busier. She was busy. She thought she was busy. Let me put it that way. She thought she was busy before the pandemic. She's never been busier. And she just started her own business. She's always been in the field, but she just started her own business recently. And guess what? She's not taking insurance because she doesn't need to, and not in a selfish way, but that's just how busy and how big this field is and how much there is of a need. So, I brought that up because I want to talk about mental health for a moment, because I don't think it can be exhausted. Anybody listening, don't hang up yet, but there could be people listening thinking, oh, come on, not mental health again. Yeah, again, because it's not going anywhere. In fact, I think it's getting worse, unfortunately. And my wife says the same. What are you seeing? What are you hearing in the news world with respect to mental health and therapy and speaking out?
I think it's getting worse, as you said, in terms of the need for more care.
That's what I meant. That's all I meant.
I think that people are rapidly understanding this. Like, I think there are many parts about workplace culture that leaders are like not really getting. I think they get this one because it's so present and the need is so urgent.
Sure.
So I think we're seeing so many companies implement programs to support mental health that are even more robust than an EAP. It's really become a talking point. Like, I just cannot believe how much workplaces are talking out loud about mental health, and it's fantastic. Like, that was just not happening before COVID, not at this volume, at least. So I feel like it's very encouraging there. I think one of the really amazing things that has happened is how much that idea of culturally competent care has been woven into the conversation around mental health care, and making sure that your employees, regardless of their race or gender or socioeconomic circumstance, can find support that is going to help them feel seen and heard and not uncomfortable. So I think the developments there are really, really exciting. I hope people continue to take advantage. I hope those programs continue to be invested in. You mentioned the EAPs. I'm curious, from your perspective, Eric, how are you seeing communications, if at all, shift around those programs? Because I think that, again, as someone who didn't work in this space prior to 2.5 years ago, when I look back on my own benefits conversations and kind of those open enrollment sessions at past employers, I don't really remember hearing anything about an EAP, or my brain had just turned off. They weren't things that I took advantage of. And now I'm like, oh, we have all this stuff that I should be taking advantage of. And I'm sure that that's partly me just being aware of this space more. But I think employers are doing a better job of communicating what it means. I'm just curious from your perspective how that's changed, if at all.
Look, I sum it up pretty easily and again, I'm the old man, but when I was in high school and college, it wasn't cool, quote unquote, to say you have a therapist, to say, hey, boss, I got to take off. I have a meeting with my therapist or my counselor or whatever it is. It wasn't spoken of. It was secretive. Almost frankly, my wife would say the same. People would be embarrassed by it. To tell somebody publicly that you see a therapist a few times a week, let alone once a week, even once a month, people would be like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? That's literally the mindset and the culture that it used to be. Not anymore. I mean, my daughter was telling me, my wife and I, our 14-year-old daughter, who's starting high school in September here in Maryland this year, 2023, Dude, I mean, I hate using the word, but it's cool to have a therapist. Like
Mhm,
most of these high school kids have a therapist, even middle schoolers, like let alone college kids. Like it's something where it's like nonchalant. It's like
mhm,
you Snapchat or you text somebody and you're like, "Hey, I'll be right back." BRB, right? And the reality is, what are you doing? Oh, I have to meet my therapist. Oh, okay, cool. I'm seeing mine tomorrow. Like
mhm,
it's ingrained in the younger culture now. So I don't know that that answers the question, but I think the reality is people are attuned to it in
mhm,
that it's just I don't know, I guess some old school companies might think there's still a stigma, but I don't see
mhm.
it.
So to your point about stigma, because that's great to hear about younger kids, and I have a nephew that's
Healthy.
13, and they're so much smarter than we were, and and kind and like nice to each other. But the other side of that is that my dad, who I adore, um, retired a little earlier than expected because of the pandemic.
Okay.
And that first year of retirement for him was rough. He had
Yeah.
spent his entire career at the same company, same people, absolutely loved it. And all of a sudden, he had nowhere to be.
Right.
And I cannot tell you, Eric, when he called me and he was like, I think I need to see a therapist. Can you help me find one? I thought I was going to fall out of my chair because my family is not a family that even utters the word therapy. And
Okay.
so for my dad to be like, I found these 4 people online. What do you think I should do next? What do you
But
think of
that's
them?
amazing,
It was
obviously.
incredible. And that's when I was like, oh, we're in a totally different place than we used to be.
And
Like,
if you don't mind me asking, how old is he roughly?
God, he'll never find this because he's bad at LinkedIn. So he won't be upset, but he's 72.
Bingo. That's why
Yeah.
I figured you'd say 60, 70, something like that. That's my
Mhm,
point. So here we have, my teenage daughter saying that all the high school, college kids and middle schoolers, even, it's like, cool. I hate
mhm.
that word for it, but
I know, but I
it's
know
a
what you mean.
thing for therapy, right? And here you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum in the 70s saying, not cool, but the same thing.
Yeah.
I want to talk to somebody.
Yeah, he definitely didn't think it was cool, but he was open to it, which,
Open.
had not been the
Exactly.
case even 5 years prior.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And look, my wife specializes in young kids who have challenges from childhood, growing up with drugs and alcohol addiction, parents and
Oh,
all that stuff.
yeah.
But the reality is she has only a handful of adults over the years, but
Mhm.
they're because she started with them when they were 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever years old, and they just continue to see her. So
Incredible.
um the look, I think it's powerful. I think it's important, and I don't think it's going to get any smaller. I think the need is still there, and it's going to continue to grow.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good thing. And what I'm excited about is, heck, I just had a meeting yesterday with an employer, a new employer group through a broker partner, and I always ask this question. So advisors and brokers, this might be something you want to add to your question list for prospects and clients. But I never leave a meeting without asking a client. The exact verbiage I say is, this is what you have, this is what we do, et cetera. But let me ask you, is there anything on your benefits wish list? Is there
Mm,
anything that you would love to bring in that, if, and I know there's always an issue, but if money was no issue, if the money was no object, is there anything you've been asked about as an employer, as an HR team, anything your employees have asked for, anything you've dreamt of offering, but you always get turned down budget wise, anything at all? And I always preface it by saying, I can't promise you I can do anything to help you. I'm just curious. And that opens up a really positive Pandora's box of a million different things you can ever imagine. And as an advisor and a broker, it really gives us an insight into their culture and what's on their mind. And one of the biggest things I hear when I ask that question is, not in random order, I hear EAP, mental health, more robust. I hear fertility. I
mhm,
hear pet benefits. Those are some of the
mhm,
biggest ones that I hear over the last, I'd say, 3, 4 years.
mhm. I mean, same from our reporting. That's huge. And I think I love that you asked that question, and the fact that people answer with stuff that's to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning. That's why this space makes me feel so optimistic, because people want to do more. And often they feel limited. And so it's amazing that folks in your position are there to help them, if possible, kind of stretch that dollar to do more.
So appreciate everybody listening. We're starting to wrap up, so hang in. We have a few great things I wanted to ask Stephanie about. Number one, let's see, we're recording this here in August. It'll probably be released in the next few weeks at some point, but um, plenty of time for people to register for EBN's newest conference coming up, Benefits at Work. It's
Yes.
going to be at the end of September, September 27th through September 29th in San Diego at the Manchester Grand Hyatt, one of my all-time favorite hotels. I've been there for various conferences over the years. I love that place. I don't know if anybody listening's ever been. Tell us what's in store, what we can expect.
I mean, we're so excited. This is a brand new conference this year. Thank you for giving me a second to talk about it. Eric is on our advisory board for at least the second year in a row with me and my team. And we've just had an incredible amount of insight from advisors and HR leaders about what we should be talking about. There's no shortage of ideas here. But we're really, really psyched. We're going to have some incredible networking opportunities and some new interactive moments at the conference. Incredible speakers, as mentioned, Eric, of course, being one of them, HR leaders and benefit leaders from Walmart, SAP, AECOM, Pepsi, Grainger. So some really, really smart folks taking the stage and being on the floor to network and share ideas. And we're thrilled to be in beautiful San Diego. And we're really excited to have our keynote speaker, Rachel Druckenmiller, who Eric kindly introduced us to. And every time I've spoken to Rachel, I'm just like, oh my God, I want to see this woman speak on stage now. She's got just like the most incredible energy, and she's going to be speaking specifically and working with our audience on site too. The session is Ignite Intentional Leadership. Mm-hmm. And I'm really, really excited that she's going to be speaking and kind of dispelling that advice and action items to our audience. I think it's wonderful that we're going to spend 3 days talking about how to deliver benefits and opportunities and culture to employees. But I think it's a really nice moment for people in your position, Eric, and HR leaders at employers and benefit leaders at employers to also think about how you can take care of yourself and make sure that you're your own best leader. And that trickle down within organizations is so vital. So I can't wait for Rachel to do her thing and for all of you incredible speakers to take the stage. And we'll also be celebrating in person for the first time ever, 2023's Excellence in Benefits winners. So some real amazing power players to be discussing the latest and greatest. So we hope to see you there, and we can't wait to see you there, Eric. We appreciate all of your help as always.
Oh man, no, I love helping. And look, you guys, you weren't around, and Horizon has gone through some different changes and so forth, which every company evolves. But years ago, you had a different name, and I've been part of the advisory board since 2014, I want to say. So I've always enjoyed helping out and coming to each conference. I don't think I've missed a single one, even when it was virtual. Look, if you're listening to this today, get yourself over to conference.benefitnews.com. You can just go to Benefit News. There's a link as well, but literally conference.benefitnews.com. Links will be in the bio, in the description as well. But dude, check out the speaker list. I mean, Rachel Druckenmiller is a rock star, literally. Truly, by the way, she has a single out. That's not a joke. She produced her own actual song. It's absolutely fantastic. And I know it's fantastic when my 14-year-old daughter says, let's play Rachel's song. Like, she knows Rachel, and it's a cool song. That's awesome. But check it out. Like, Walmart is speaking, the Skim is speaking, Calm is speaking, Grainger, somebody big from Acrisure, Walmart, Wealthy. I'm looking at it as I talk. I didn't even realize it was NerdWallet. Get the chief people officer for NerdWallet. My good friend Ed Legande, partner over at Nava Benefits, is speaking. Good Lord, Pepsi. Geez, the list just doesn't stop. EY, 3Flow, CVS, Ascensus. I could keep going. Check it out. Conference.benefitnews.com. Register. I hope you decide to join us in San Diego. There are a lot worse places you can be in September than San Diego. San Diego is incredible year round. It is
conference also ends on a Friday, so you can squeeze in a long weekend.
And we will be. I'm going to bring my wife. At least that's the plan.
That seems to be the plan.
We
across
love
the board.
San Diego. There's two places
city
in this world that we want to retire to. Pick one, or maybe do both one day. And they're opposites but similar. Key West, Florida, in the very southeast, literally southernmost point, and then San Diego. So we have to pick
Can't go
one.
wrong.
Those are good problems to have if I have to pick one.
Mhm.
Look, I appreciate you coming on. The only thing I want to end on before we let you go in the last couple of minutes is, and I love it, I noticed a lot of females speaking at this year's conference. And it was that way last year in Austin as well. But I'm really impressed by that. Was that intentional? Was that happenstance? Is it a continuing push that I see women in the workplace and so forth to speak about health in general? Talk to us about that as we wrap up.
We always want to make sure that in our coverage and at our events that we have a roster of speakers and sources that represents the actual workforce. So 50%, yes, it's intentional that we have a lot of women speaking on stage, but 50% it's not intentional that the bulk is. But I think there are so many incredible women leaders, particularly in people leadership and benefit roles right now. And so we're happy to give them the spotlight. And I think there's so much discussion right now, rightfully, around women in the workplace and women's health. I think this has obviously blown up throughout the course of our experience with COVID-19, and I think it's really going to stick. I think the crescendo around this is similar to how we talked about mental health in the early days of the pandemic. I feel like people are really starting to understand that women employees are not just talented, but they are at risk of exiting the workforce if they don't have the right support. And that's everything from caregivers, which of course they do make up the majority of, but also we're in a sticky moment about reproductive care, as you all know, and menopause support is really, really spiking. We are just all of a sudden, it's such a loud discussion. And I understand that it's really, really blown up in the UK in recent years. And it seems like we're just kind of pacing a couple of years behind that. So I think the interest in coming there will be interesting to see over the next couple of years and throughout the remainder of this year about how employers can rise to meet those needs, because similar to the way people now talk about mental health, people are no longer afraid to talk about menopause, which is great. It's a fun workplace conversation. So I think we're going to hear a lot more of it.
Fair enough. Well, listen, as we wrap, look, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I just show up and ask some fun questions and have a good time and chat as if we were having a cup of coffee, at least virtually. Although for me today, as a diet do, I needed some caffeine. But look, I wouldn't be anywhere without my people. I have a team of people behind me, and they do all the, we don't do much editing, but they do all the fancy stuff to make us look even prettier than we already are. For all the advisors and brokers that listen, and for all the human resource professionals and heroes that listen as well, just real quick, you do accept articles from other outside sources that could be contributors, correct?
Absolutely. The website, the email address is, let me just double check it because I don't.
And we'll put it in the notes as well. But I just wanted people to realize that, because I think a lot of people have good ideas that to speak on, but they forget that you're always looking for good resources.
Absolutely. I mean, we are constantly looking for op-eds, both from the advisor and broker audience and from the HR leaders. If you guys visit benefitnews.com, there is a detail about how to submit and some guidelines. You can also email me directly. I am stephanie.schomer@horizon.com. We're always expanding that roster and looking for folks who can be regular voices on our site. So thank you to all of those who already contribute, particularly in the advisor space, and anyone who's interested. You guys know where to find me.
You're going to send, if you're listening, you're going to send the email to Stephanie, or you can send it to ebnviews@horizon.com, ebnviews@horizon.com. Right on their main website, benefitnews.com. There's a little, actually, it's a big box that says contributions in gray. You can't miss it. And that has all the details and instructions. Look, you're the best. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody listening. For everybody behind the scenes at the Rockstars Rocking podcast, I'm Eric Silverman. That is, was, and always will be the one, the only editor-in-chief at Benefit News. Stephanie Schomer, thank you, my friend.
Thanks so much. It was so great being here. I appreciate you having me.
I'll see you in September.
I can't wait. Thanks, Eric.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Rockstars Rocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars, keep rocking.